What's up, everyone? Got a different kind of video for you today in that it's not GBL content, it's play Pokemon content. Wanted to create a video to help people think through how to build a team in preparation for a play Pokemon event. So whether it's a local league challenge or a cup or a regional you're trying to prepare for, what are the things you need to think about? What kind of strategy or philosophy do you need to understand and embrace in order to build a competitive team to do well in these events? Not a whole lot of content out on this right now, and so I thought this would be very helpful as more and more people are trying to earn their championship points to get an invitation to Worlds. So what I've done is I've asked a couple battlers who have competed and done well in recent Play Pokemon events to share their strategy, their philosophy, what goes through their mind as they build a team for an event like this. So we're going to begin with Wadaj's video and roll that now.
I'm going to walk you through how I ended up making my team for the Pittsburgh Regional that I ended up winning. So with all my general team building, I normally start with a core. A core can be anything that complements each other well. So for this tournament in particular, I wanted to go with Lickitung and Dragonite. So normally when I ended up choosing my mons, I look at some usage and what people are disrespecting a bit more and can end up working out better in the meta, which is why I chose Dragonite. Some people didn't have many ice types or any fairies. I thought it'd be a good core breaker for the top 6 meta top mons that would be prevalent. So from here, you just need to choose mons. I choose mons that are either good at core breaking the meta or that complement your core well. So, like this, I have Swampert, which I thought was a really good core breaker at the time, and it did end up working very well. There's a lot of grasses, but at the same time, people didn't have any grasses or no dragons, which makes Swampert normally very safe. And one of my favorite mons to complement my Dragonite is Dugong, which ends up being just one of the safest mons in the meta. It's really good at slowing down the game, and when you have such a bulkless mon in Dragonite, the debuffs really help it, and you're able to force people to do what you want easier. And from here, this is the base. I start with 4 mons. Is basically where you want to start, in my opinion. It gives you a good core 4 plus whatever you want, and from here, I think every team needs to have either Deoxys or Medicham on it. So I ended up going with Deoxys in this team, mainly because I was weaker to Medicham, and Deoxys is very good at shutting down opposing Medichams and has good bench pressure to come with it. And in this meta specifically, the final pick I think you need is something that can shut down Lickitung or Umbreon, or something very bulky like those two. And the best thing to do that in the meta right now is Registeel. There's other steel options like A-Slash, but for what I needed to shut down those bulky mons, A-Slash does not do a good job at all at doing that, and that's what I needed my steel for. You often have multiple options of what you want to do, but you need to recognize what works best for you and what you need with your team. But all of that can be done starting with a core you want to play or will think be good in the meta. So that's all I got. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Wadaj. Awesome, very insightful video, being able to think through how to build a team from scratch, starting with nothing and arriving at a full team of 6, starting with choosing that core, building around to strengthen that core, as well as choosing some mons that can counter the meta mons on your opponent's team that can break their cores and give you play against the general meta. So some of those thoughts of Registeel instead of Sandslash, for instance, being able to shut down Lickitung, one of the top meta Pokemon that you're going to see, as well as Umbreon. Very insightful to see some of these things. So thank you, Wadaj. We're going to look at Magic Mason's video now. Magic Mason competed in Worlds last year. Very strong battler, Twitch streamer, amazing guy, and also competed in Pittsburgh. Placed top 8, had an interesting team, and he's going to share some of his philosophy as well as some of the resources that are helpful for him.
Hello, y'all. It's Magic Mason here. You guys may know me from my Twitch streams, but I'm also very active in the Play Pokemon circuit. So I'm going to come talk to you guys a little bit about some team building strategies that I have in successful ways to go about building a team if you are going to prepare to compete in any of these Show 6 tournament, Show 6 Pick 3 formats, such as the Play Pokemon events. So it's a couple of default questions I have back here, but sort of where I started about building a team. I mean, we all know PvPoke is the best resource there is out there. Team building, seeing the rankings. Big thank you to Empoleon Dynamite for having this great resource for us to use. But really, when you're first starting to build a team, you're really going to start with a good meta core probably in most situations if you're going to build a solid team. Something as the Medilicky core, which is really popular right now. Something more like a Gligar, Lantern type of core, where they cover each other pretty well. You have the Lantern that handles the ices for the Gligar and other things, and the Gligar can handle the grasses for Lantern, etc. Situations like that. And there's always a good strategy of being able to plug that right into PvPoke from that point and just start going from there as a resource. Or you can pair it with another core. You could pair like 2 of those cores together, for an example. Or one of my best strategies is pretty much using PvPoke, but try to see what kind of core breakers there are available for that initial core that you use, and find a third mon that may sort of help cover that weakness that you have there. I think a really good strategy there is sometimes that I've been able to have success with in the past is having a little bit of a spicy pick, anti-meta core breaker type of mon, such as my most recent one, Alola Marowak. Didn't serve quite the purposes I really liked it to. Didn't feel like I had a chance to use it as much as I would have liked. But other things such as Guzzlord, which broke that notorious Lantern Trevenant core in the past, and even things that I've used in the past that I know Hoff has been popular with, like a Tapu Fini, for example. Just showing that using a little bit of an off-meta pick that really does serve a good purpose into the meta can sometimes make your opponents really, double guess their strategies that they may have had planned going into the tournament, because they're going up against something that they didn't really practice against too much, or think about what kind of answers they had available for those certain mons. So it then talks further about if I have any lines going into the tournament, and I'm not really someone who does that a lot. I mean, I have general ideas. For example, back when I brought that Shadow Drapion and Tapu core, they sort of worked pretty well together, where you have the poison type on the Drapion to help cover for grass weaknesses. Tapu can beat the fighters and the grounds for the Drapion. But I really noticed that they sort of also work good with Galarian Stunfisk, which for the most part of my play Pokemon career was my primary steel type until recently. Now, especially with a little bit of a nerf, but I've been opting towards the Registeel a little bit. Really just personal preference there, at least before the nerf. But I noticed that with the Drapion being able to often bait out the Medicham or say Swampert, any of the Mud Boys, it left room for Stunfisk to sweep a lot in the back for me. And Tapu did a good job of being the lead in that situation where it could beat those Mud Boys after we baited them out, or the Medis, for example. Sometimes I would lead my own Medi, and that's where it's really cool to have a little bit of flexibility on your team, where you can have a similar back line with 2 different lead options depending on your opponent's teams in those situations. But it's really all what you really got to figure out with your teams and your strategies, for sure. I think, like I said, using PvPoke, and now that you have the first 3 or 4 in mind, if you're building a team of 3 based off of, like I said, like a specific ABB strategy, or that core, you have those first 4. I think this is really one of the most crucial times to then use PvPoke as you get to your 4th and 5th Mon, and just make sure you're checking how many weaknesses you have and that you have 2 answers for most Mons, particularly the Meta Mons. I like to go for 2 to 3 answers, mostly 2 to 3 answers for most Meta Mons. If possible, it's not always able to do so with how wide the meta can get sometimes, but it's a really good strategy. So checking where those weaknesses are, and then using those last couple spots to sort of fill it out there, and make sure that you're covering every weakness and give yourself the best ability. Because if you only have one answer for certain mons, you run into those, like, say, like I was weak to Altaria in the time before, and really with a Rich Steel was my only answer. You sort of have to lead it and go ABB against it, or make a hard line read that they're going to have, like, that thing in the back. Say for me, the Altaria in the back. So if you don't have two answers, it really makes you a little bit predictable with the team comps that you're going to have available to run against in any individual. So those are certain things that you want to make sure you're really considering with how you're finishing it out at the end there. Once you have your first 3, 4, even 5 mons, just that you have good answers for most things in the meta. Prime example for me with my last team, Alola Marowak really seemed like a spicy pick, and it really was. But I just really felt weak to steals like A/, grasses like Venusaur, and still a little bit soft to Medicham, which is, I think, the #1 used Pokemon in all the Play Pokemon series. So as something that really targeted the things that my team was weak to, as well as being a little bit of an off-meta spice pick, just seemed like it could be something that was going to, help me succeed. And, the 2 times I brought it, I won my matches. But like I said, it was a little bit underwhelming pick. And sometimes you take those risks and they don't always pay off. But I mean, just like I think it's Axon had a situation before, or not a situation before, but in the World Championships where he, had a team of 6 and didn't even bring one of his Mons the whole time. You can always use these certain Pokemon as bench pressure, and really just have them available to you as well. Really different strategies. Speaking of its Axon, that's another good point to pick out, though, is you can always should or can look into break-in bulk points as well, to sort of optimize certain matchups with I think primarily the most obvious one was the Medicham Mirror, where he was able to get that little bit of an extra attack break point and / bulk point compared to opposing Medis, where doing more damage there and able to win that mirror matchup, especially like with once again, like I said, it being the most common Pokemon in the meta. And then last thing I really did want to really touch on is, so now once you have that team of 6, really go out and then try to get some scrims, practice, enter tournaments, not only with just your typical scrim partners, because you end up seeing a lot of the same meta you may, from scrimming with them over and over again. Sorry about that. But, it just gives you a really chance to, see other things that you may like. I know I was sort of writing off Lantern after its little bit of a spark nerf. I mean, it wasn't fully nerfed because it does more damage, but I didn't like the energy drop off and how slow you were pacing to moves before. But I did sort of underestimate the power of, I think, the other moveset that was always available, Water Gun, which we saw have success in the past. So I ran into somebody in a practice tournament using Water Gun Lantern, and it sort of gave me the idea to bring it myself. And that's also sort of where I learned about my team being a little bit weak, even before adding the Lantern to the Venusaur, the Medicham, and then even like the Alolan Sandslash. So then ended up adding, like an Alola Marowak onto my team. So my team really did shift somewhat before Pittsburgh compared to the team I was practicing with. I still practiced a little bit with the final team, but it's really good to get some practicing with your team, because you might have a team that looks really good on paper, but you don't really like how it's playing out exactly. And you always have the opportunity to learn something new from some practice, some scrims, and really help you towards that finalizing your team near the end. So utilizing PV Poke and those scrims at the end of your team building process is a huge thing to keep in mind and definitely take advantage of. So those are a lot of things I have. I don't really think there's much more that I have. I guess one thing you can do is look at the meta of previous tournaments and try to get an idea of if you want to bring some of those core breakers off meta picks, what was common in the past. You can sometimes even predict the future meta based off of, what you see as a core breaker. Others are probably going to see as the same core breaker. So as these metas do shift throughout the season, and people are bringing new mons. Just to try to keep ahead of the game by knowing what's coming, at the next tournament, because meta shifts can happen. I know primarily last year we saw at the beginning with the Noctowl Lantern Trev core, a lot of people thought was like unbreakable, pretty strong, but we saw that I think Shadow Swampert, Shadow A9, or at least some form of that core, sort of take over for a little bit there, and I think it was just based off the strength that they had into that original core a little bit, both having a couple of small weaknesses there. Swampert being weak to the Trevenant and A9 being weak to the Lantern. But for the most part, they had 2 out of 3 wins or play against 2 of those 3 mons, as well as other mons that were in the meta. So those are always things you can definitely keep in mind. We have a lot of new resources with the DracoViz websites, etc. Keeping track of the metas and everything like that. So really big thank you to everyone in this community that contributes, providing us these resources as battlers. I don't know where I would be trying to build teams without PvPoke or any of these other resources that we have available. But yeah, that's all the tips I really have. Not sure what else I could give you as tips. I'm always really open to answering questions, so if you ever have any individual questions, you feel free to hit me up on anything like a Twitter or Discord or something like that, and I would try to give you some feedback or answer any questions that you may have. But those are just some of the tips that I have, and how I really go about team building. Good luck in any of these Show 6 Pick 3 formats, especially if you go to any play Pokemon tournaments. And yeah, definitely focus on that team building, as that's really the main part, or the big first step entering into these teams. Your battle skill can only take you so far if you don't have a good team to go with. So good luck with those team building efforts, and good luck in any of these tournaments you do.
All right, thanks, Mason, Magic Mason, giving us some depth of insight into his process and how he builds a team. Some similarities with the Wadaj video in terms of beginning with a good meta core. So if you are just getting started and you're like, what's the first step? That would be the first step. Choose your core. 2 Pokemon that complement each other well, cover for each other's weaknesses, and have play against the meta. From that point, you're going to build some things out. So Mason suggested building another core, adding another core of 2 Pokemon, so that you have kind of 2 teams that you can pivot between, that are going to have play against whatever it is that you face. Having 2 cores, or finding a third Pokemon that can cover your core's weaknesses. So if you have, a Lickitung and a Dragonite like Wadaj, or if you have a Gligar and a Lantern, okay, what's something that can break that core, and making sure you have a counter to that thing. And then from there, he suggested using this resource, PvPoke. If you don't know about PvPoke, check it out, pvpoke.com. Almost impossible to effectively build teams and be on a competitive level in this game without PvPoke. And so I'm glad Mason gave a shout out there. Such a helpful resource, necessary resource for doing well in this game. And you can use that tool, the Team Builder feature, to see what are my team's weaknesses, how can I round this thing out, how can I strengthen my weaknesses, as well as bring in some things that can push back and counter the meta that I'm going to come up against to round out my team. And so Mason suggested having 2 to 3 answers for each top meta Pokemon, right? That's not always going to work out, he brought up, but his point was saying that if you only have one answer for a top meta Pokemon, it's going to put you into an RPS situation that makes your opponent, gives them the opportunity to read your teams more easily. When you have multiple answers, that's more difficult to prepare for. And then he talked about getting in practice with scrims, right? And so connecting with other people over Discord or locals, participating in local league challenges and league cups to get that kind of practice in with your team. That, PvPoke is great, but real actual experience battling is going to be what's going to give you a feel for how you play your team. So being able to get that practice in is essential. I hope y'all enjoyed these videos, found them helpful. I would love to see the Play Pokemon competitive scene continue to grow. It's something I'm personally interested in myself. We got some local events started here where I live. I plan on participating in a regional international championship, possibly think it's awesome to see this part of the PvP community growing. And so, hope y'all enjoyed. Let me know what y'all think in the comments, and be blessed.